Sweet.
So you'd expect a little bit more of it. He was admittedly a little bit nervous. He told me after the round. It's the first time I've been ready.
We got 2 minutes. Oh. How do I do that? I'll co-host. Mm-hmm. We're going to get started. Seconds. Make co-host. Chat. All right. Good. And share. All right, I think I got it. Record. Yeah, sweet. Everyone good? Good. That's what we want. Sweet. You can all see my screen? Good. Can I guess, right? You can all hear me? All right. That's all I want to check. Awesome. Hope you had a good lunch. Let's get back in here. So we had left off with just before the section on logical operators. And with logical operators, we can evaluate more than one condition. So there are going to be times when you need to confirm if 2 things are true, or one of the 2 things are true, or both things are false. And so we can do that using the and or logical operators. So here we have true, and true, and false, and false. And once again, if we console log true, and true, see what we get. Clear this out. We get true, obviously, right? And if we console log false, and false, we should get the same thing, but they're false, right? Because they're both false. One of them is false, and the other one is false. So this is false. Each side, so in these examples, each side is the same. They are equivalent, right? But But in the case where both sides do not both evaluate to true, if an AND statement begins with a false, it automatically evaluates to false too. So if I do it's true and false, well, then that's going to be false because there is one false. Both conditions need to evaluate for it to be true. So we can take the one step further and just say, hey, const A is equal to true, const B is equal to false, and then just run, A, and then B. See what we get. I'm going to comment this out so that doesn't interfere with us. And we get false, only because one of them is false. If I obviously put that as true, then we're going to get it to be true. Okay. We also have the or operator. So I'm going to just set this back to false. Okay. If we change this from and to or, I'm going to keep that, just comment it out so you have an example of it. And we change this to or, well, then that should evaluate to true because one side of the equation is true. So I'm just saying, hey, if one of them is true, then that's all I'm looking for. Okay. So another example of using the or, is say, hey, let username is equal to empty username. Let user is equal to username or Bob. I'm just going to abbreviate it. And if we console log user, we should get here Bob because this is false. Well, let's see what we get, right? We get Bob. So Bob gets returned back to us. Because the user, what we're doing is evaluating this condition. Whichever one is true is going to kind of get returned back. So this Bob here is what kind of gets returned back to us as being defined as the user. If username had anything, if it had the letter A in it, right, then it would be A. It wouldn't be Bob. But the fact that it's false means we take a look at the second thing and then just kind of return the second thing. Okay? That's easy enough, right? Obviously, there's a lot to these conditionals, right? You're going to find the use cases as they come up. We're just trying to cover all the bases so we get the fundamentals down. There's also the Boolean order of evaluation, which, once again, isn't something I really come across very often. But don't memorize them. I mean, you can always look them up if you need to. I would probably have to look them up myself. I don't use them all the time. So it's just one of those things. If you ever come across where you have to evaluate which one, kind of like PEMDAS in that respect, you can take a look at this Boolean order of evaluation. So try to guess the results before you check it. If it's not what you expected, try to find out why. So let's just take maybe 2 minutes. Go through these little examples here. And what I want you to do is ask the question, what's the return result before you do it? That's really important. You got to start training your mind to think about it before you see the return result. And then that way, if you're wrong, at least it's something that you can be like, oh, it's wrong. You'll remember that wrong. And if you're right, then you kind of knew the return results and probably had the logic for it. Okay? So give that a shot. I'm going to go to the Slack. And let's put in here another squid. I'm using squid for today. Yeah, some of these are just trippy. Just to walk through the logic and be like, what would that be? It's almost like a riddle going through these things. All right, 21, getting close. $25 looks good. Sweet. All right, so let's kind of go through this logic. I hope everyone did like take the time to think it through. And so I didn't do the consts here. Did I do the A? This was it, right? Give these two true, true. I didn't do the const. Const A is equal to true. And const B is equal to false. And let me just get the other one here. A and console log A, and then A is equal to B. Okay, let's see what we got. So this one, I'm going to kind of run them all and let's walk through it. So console log, the first one, A and A is equal to B. So that's false, right? So A is true. And so in order this thing to be completely true, the other side of the equation also needs to be true, and A is not equal to B, right? I should probably use the 3 equals also. That's not going to really change anything. It's still going to be the same thing. So this and just means whatever on this side needs to be true and whatever's on that side needs to be true. That's it. And so A is already true, but this comparison here is not true. For the second one, we have, is it not false and true? So not false, right? So something like not false is really true, right? Because it's the opposite of what it is. That's what the bang operator does. It converts it to the opposite. So not false is true, and true is true. So hey, it's true, right? That's going to be true. That's going to be false, right? Is it false or true? Once again, once we hit the or operator, we just need one condition. So that's true. Now we get to this one, right? Not true means it's false. Okay, so it's not going to be true if we were just basing it on this. Or not false is true, and not false is true. So that is true. And the last one, 8 is greater than 1. That's true. and true or true, either one of these, right? So the true or true. So that also comes out to true, right? I mean, these are just kind of trippy examples to kind of get your brain working, thinking about it. These aren't kind of like the practical real world examples that you're going to go through, but they are ways for you to like look at something and help start to understand the logic. There's going to be other things that you do, another kind of logic that you run that is kind of maybe convoluted and complicated in such a way that you have to train your brain to look at it and take it step by step to evaluate what something is in order to take the next step. Cool. All right, we got one more thing to get through for this particular lecture. The modulo operator. This particular operator, it's kind of cool. There are a lot of use cases for it. So if I do 4 modulus 2, right? The modulus operator returns back, well, you know what? Let's see what it returns. I'm going to console log all that, save it. Here my console, and save the file, run it, and it returns back 0. So the modulus operator returns the remainder. So 2 divided by 4, there's nothing left. There's no remainder left, so it kind of returns 0. If this was, right, that would return 0. If we did console log 5 modulus 2, well, then that's going to return 1 because 5 divided by 2, that's 4, right? It can go in there twice, and then we have this 1 left over, and that 1 left over is what's returned. The remainder of the equation, that's what gets returned. Same thing here. So if it's 8 modulus 3, we're going to get the return result of 2, and we'll get that here. Okay, so the modulus operator is useful in the respect that, for the most part, where we're going to use the modulus operator is to determine if a number is odd or even. Okay, that's kind of the use case that we have for it, and we can even see it here. We can say if 5 modulus 2 is equal to 0, because we know that that's what gets returned, right? 0 would get returned if the thing is evenly divided. So this is not going to, I'm going to say console log, or is it number is even. So let's take a look. I'm going to save it, clear this. Oh, do I have these running here? Right, yeah. So it's not even, right? And that's because we know that 1 is left over. Obviously, if I change this to 1, then we'd see the number is even. We know it's not even. We know it's odd. So we'd have to change this to be, it is odd, right? In order for this to evaluate, because we know that 1 is left over, right? But we could say something like, right? We could use, in that instance, see down here the bang operator, and we can say if it's not equal to 0, right? If it's not, then it has to be an odd number. I'm going to change this back to odd. It has to be an odd number. The only way something's ever going to be even is if it returns, if it's divided modulus by 2, is if nothing gets returned, right? That's the only way it's ever going to evaluate to true. So it's odd, okay? Same thing is like 49 divisible by 7. Sure, it is, then it's divisible by 7. So when we do 2, we're looking for, odds and evens, but you can also expand this to do something like other numbers to see if they're divisible by that also. So if we do that, we'll get the number is divisible by 7. I'm seeing the most practical use case is usually doing odds and evens, like find all the even numbers in a list of numbers, right? Or grab every other list item and change its background color to light gray. So you have this, white, light gray, something like that. That's usually where it is. But, you may have some math problem that's like, hey, I need all numbers from 1 to 100 that are divisible by 7, and boom, you have it. And so we could combine those logics together to just say, if it's divided by 7, then it's even. If not, it's odd. And in this instance, it would be odd. And so this modulus, once again, something we're going to use quite often when we hit the algos too. When you're working through algorithms, this is something just keep in your back pocket. Okay. So let's see what we got here. What's the issue? 5 modulus 2 is equal to 0. Number is even, else this looks correct, right? So we mentioned before, indentation denotes hierarchy of your code. So they're talking hierarchy. That's important. You see how this code here is not indented? Indentings are just as important when you're doing HTML, right? When you created your HTML structure, when you create it, it indents the code to say that this is a child of that, right? That's how you look at it. That's how I can get a visual representation of the structure. In JavaScript, it's the same way. You want this. This is going to work. I can't imagine that code would not work, right? So I'm just going to run it so that you can see that it works. But once again, this should be indented. Okay? Well, not indented at that point. Indented there. The indentation should happen to visually describe to the user that this belongs to that natural structure. I think, I mentioned yesterday, you're writing the code for someone else, right? So that they can read it and decipher and understand. And part of that understanding is the nesting. And so don't ever post code like this. Oh my God, if you ever went to Stack Overflow and you posted code like that, oh my God, I can only imagine the comments you're going to get back. When I was in your shoes one day, I posted on Stack Overflow where I did not include the semicolons, and some dude responded back to me like, hey, Liv, you want to be literally, quoting what he said. I don't remember exactly, but he was like, if you want to be taken seriously as a developer, you got to have the semicolons. Like, if you really want us to look at your code, you got to put like, serious? Like, the amount of time and effort that it took you to think about the statement and write the statement, you couldn't have just said yes or no to my question. Like, you had to kind of like make me look bad in the general public. Come on, that's just rude. Just letting you know, people out there are going to be rude. So do not do that. Make sure your code has all proper semicolons, everything that needs to get done, everything, so that it looks good. And there's tools that allow you to fix your code. Okay. I know that we're not going to be using it quite often, but I'm just showing it. I'm not saying like go out of your way to do this. In my evening class, I do a lot of code pens, and one of the reasons why I do these code pens is because they allow me to take code, or allow the students to take code. I'm just going to paste it in there. And if I left out the semicolons, if I didn't indent it, I could just run this tool. And, Adam has it. I just have to find the right tool. I could say tidy.js, and look, it tabbed it, add the semicolons. So when I'm writing my code, I don't always tab naturally. I don't use the tool, but I always kind of add the semicolons later on so that it looks kind of official, especially if I'm posting on Stack Overflow. Okay, but we didn't really use code pens in this particular class. We jump right into like coding using Node and running files. That's where we focus your attention on. Cool. So I think we made it to the end of here. The only thing, the only other 2 points that then we want to bring up here is semantic naming. So don't use variable names like X and Y. The only time I use variable X and Y is when I'm doing something with D3, a data visualization library. And the data visualization library creates, bar charts and axes, right? Whoop. So this is always X, this is always Y. And so if I do X and Y, it's because I'm referencing the X axis and the Y axis, or the X scale and the Y scale. And anytime I do something like that, I still preface it like let X scale, or let X axis, okay? I indicate exactly what it is, because saying just let X alone, right? I don't know. What the hell is that? Is that the scale? Is that the axis? What is it? You're just making up variable names. So you want to keep it semantically named correctly. Use longer names if you need. Time Tracker or Uncle Roy's Chicken Cat. Don't really know where that one came from. And it's also camel case too. The more description that you can give, the better. Don't ever think like the variable name is just too long. The more that helps me understand. Also, don't do underscores, right? We use camel case. So this is, Python uses that. Ruby uses underscores as well. So it helps you to distinguish the languages that you're looking at too. If I'm looking at a language and it's an underscore, I can make a decision. Is it this or is it this? I know Ruby, I can make the distinction. It's not Ruby. If it doesn't look like Ruby, I can say it's probably Python, right? But I don't know. And then case sensitivity, right? Uppercase is not lowercase. They're not the same thing. Cool? I know that was a lot. And yet we have more. So I'm going to jump into the other lecture so we can kind of get through that lecture and then assign you some lab time. It's really all about lecturing and then labs. So I'm going to open up the next lecture. I will post it. Oh, why my mouse is, there we go. All right, I just posted the other lecture. Good. This one's not a super long lecture. Again, I like when the lectures involve a lot more code-alongs, a lot more interaction.
Did anyone else get a 404 on that?
Yeah, link
I
is
got
the
one.
WDI.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Second, I'm going to save
Fail.
file. Not going to be in either one of those files. Cool, and you'll get the chance to apply all this during the lab, promise. All right, so here we go. We're going to create a new file, right? So I'm just going to do an ls to show you that I have conditional practice.js and math.js. I can do an ls minus l that lists them on top of each other, okay? Just so that you can see what's inside of it. I am now going to touch a new file, and we'll call this loops underscore conditionals. You know, I almost feel like, because these aren't variable names, right? These are file names. And in the world of Bash, we really create file names with underscores. That's kind of like its thing versus the camel case. So touching it, and here's loops and conditionals. Sweet. And once again, I'm just going to console log, make sure inside loops and conditionals, right? Just making sure that works. Node, loops and conditionals, return inside loops and conditionals. So I'll give you a minute to create that file. Shouldn't take more than a minute. Oh, is my, yeah, my volume was off again. Sorry, Aaron.
I was trying to tell you before, but you didn't see the message. So I was like, I'm not even going to try to come off mic because obviously you're not going to hear me.
Yeah, I don't know why it defaults to being off. That's must be a new setting because I do Zoom all the time. Yeah.
No problem. At least you saw it.
Yeah. Did anyone have any questions? I feel bad because I'm like, maybe somebody was talking and I didn't hear the questions. I also have Slack open to my right. So I periodically look over at my other screen. So yeah, I didn't see that come in though. That was like 2 minutes ago. Yeah, so you Slacked it 2 minutes ago. So I looked over and I saw it. Thank God it wasn't too long. Is everyone good? Sweet. let us jump into, all right, learning objectives here. After this lesson, students are going to be able to use conditionals and Booleans and loops. So we just kind of went through this whole process of running conditionals, right? And that included straight up Booleans and the ability to use ands and ors to evaluate multiple conditions. Okay, so what happens when we combine the two together is really it. So I know the homework last night contained loops, right? And I know Jericho was going to review the homework after lunch, but we're jumping right into the lecture. And I said that I would review the loops to kind of cover that, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And this lecture has a lot of loops, so I think we can bang out two, kill two birds with one stone, right? So I'm gonna start the loop right here. I'm gonna do the loop. So actually here, I want us to make a new file, right? Let's create a new file. Not really sure why we need another file here. So you know what? I'm just gonna use this file. I don't think we need another loops file. I'm gonna say for. That's the key word. Let step is equal to 0, right? I'll write this out and then I'll explain what's happening. Is less than 5, semicolon, step. Now I'm going to do this, plus equals 1. I'm doing plus equals 1 because according to the Airbnb style guide, this is a better practice than using the shorthand plus plus. Now, I almost always default to plus plus. That's just a shorthand. It's easier to type. This requires, 2 more characters per se. A space is being not like a character, right? Another space and then the number 1. So 3 more things I got to do in order to do this. But that is more intuitive for people to read, especially newbies who maybe don't know what plus plus means. That's more intuitive. And if we went into the style guide, we'd see that this is the standard. So if I see step plus plus, I'm going to swap it to what would be considered the best practices standard, okay? So in this loop right here, right, we have our initializer, right? We're defining our starting value, right? Then we have our conditional, and then we have our incrementer, right? So initialize, condition, and then our incrementer, right? This is where we start, this is where we're going, and this is how we get there, one value at a time. Now, if we console log this, console log, walking east 1 step, right? We spoke about the comma before, and the comma separates. This is text, this is the value. And if we run this, boom, it outputs 5 times, right? 5 times starting with 0, right? Because we started with 0 while step is less than 5. So we're going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we have it, right? Here's an interesting, I don't know if we can do this. Let me just see if I did console log. I think because of the scoping, we can't get in there. I'm just going to say if I change it to var, we can't do that. If I did this as a var, this is one of those instances where we were talking about where the difference between var and lets, and I use it only as an example. I don't write like this. Do you see how step is now 5? I mean, the loop ran, I don't know, and it only went up to 4, and then it stopped, but it didn't. It really evaluated and then increased the last time. It increased step by 1, and then once it went back to the evaluation, it then said, oh no, you're 5, so you're not less than 5, you are 5. Okay, this is how we initialize something, and then this step gets run, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to run it once, I'm going to evaluate, right? I'm going to raise it, and then I'm going to go back here and evaluate. I'm going to raise it, then I'm going to come back here and evaluate, then I'm going to increment, right? So in the end, the actual number becomes 5. And you see how defining this as a var, that variable scope expanded outside of the for loop, right? I can see it outside of the for loop, yet when it's a let, I cannot see it outside of the for loop. If I run this thing again, what you're going to see is an error that step is not defined. So let has a much more stricter scope to where it's defined and how far it goes up into kind of more of the global scope. Where is it visible? So that's one of the reasons why kind of lets came out, is because people would be doing var I is equal to this, and then I in the rest of your code could be mutated because I can touch I now outside of my code. Okay, so that was important. That's an important leap in JavaScript with that. So let's think about this. Find the sum of all the even integers. Oh, remember, we just finished like even numbers, odd numbers, right? Sounds familiar. And so we would start out pseudocoding these particular steps, right? You probably should write down all your thought processes in order to do this. Now, what I want you to do is this, and I know pseudocode was kind of mentioned, right? And pseudocode is really important when it comes to writing more complicated code. A lot of us just jump right into like, man, I'm a developer and I code, that's what I do. I kind of think about it while I'm coding. And let me tell you, thinking about it before you code is much more important. Like somebody who builds a house doesn't just build it on the fly, right? They think about it, they have designs for it, and then they build it when they thought about the whole thing. Thinking about it first is really key in being successful in developing code so that you don't have to go back and refactor because now you coded yourself into a corner and now you have to go back and refactor huge chunks of code. It's really, really a pain in the ass. Don't suggest it at all. So I'm going to give you, say, 3 to 5 minutes. I want you to think about how you would solve this using conditionals, right? Modulus, so the things that it does need here, we covered the modulus, right, in the last module, right, in the last lecture. We got modulus. We need a looping construct, right? Looping we need, and we need conditionals, right? Everything that we've covered today and a little bit of yesterday is in this particular one, okay? So I want you to find the sum of all the integers between 0 and 10. Okay, I'm gonna give you 3 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and post your pseudocode into Slack. I want this to just be pseudocode, not actual code. Just post your pseudocode into Slack. So I'm gonna give like 5 minutes here. All right, looks good. Find some variable loop from 1 to 10.
Now, we had a question similar to this, like in a labyrinth homework last night.
Okay.
So I think it was one of the same things. It was like not adding the integers, but just printing out all the even numbers. I just did a loop from 0 to 10 and just did I plus equals 2 because that's going to do 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Mm-hmm.
In situations like that, is that fine to just kind of make it easier?
Yeah, I think most of the time, you know, so you didn't use the modulus operator, Jeremy, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So once again, you don't have to use the modulus operator. There's more than one way to get things done, right? So I'm glad that like you're seeing the bigger picture, that certain things are done, or there's at least more than one way. What I would kind of consider too is just think when you're on interviews. Also, what would the interviewer want you to resolve it, or how would the interviewer expect that you would resolve something as well? So a lot of the times I'm going to see, the algorithm sites, Code Wars, or I forgot a few of the other ones, how they would do it. And a lot of the times they use modulus. I'm not saying that you couldn't use yours and you could justify using it, and that's great. So being that there's more than one way, feel free to do it whichever way you want. But also, maybe not under this particular condition, but under the conditions of what you think the interviewer would expect you to answer it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Because if you ever go to an interview and it's like reverse a string of text, right? Like I could take a string of text and do dot reverse. If I did that on an interview, on a coding interview, they would be like, you can't do that. You can't do like something like this, dot reverse, and expect that that's going to get you the job. If I did this and I was like, oh yeah, you want me to reverse a string of text, dude? Come on, like that's a no-brainer, right? Oh, step is not. We're doing back to the step thing again. So let me get rid of step. If you did this, they would probably be like, oh, reverse is not a function. Oh, so I have to define the variable. Let s is equal to string. Maybe if we did this, console log s. Let me see if this works. Still, that's not reverse. I know reverse is the method. So I'm surprised as I'm doing console log, I'm doing something wrong. So, when stuff like this happens, sometimes I just go to the developer tools and I'm like, hey, var s is equal to, I'm going to try this. String dot reverse. Oh, is it not? No. Man. Could have sworn it was, you know why? Because reverse is an array method. Oh, so I almost forgot. It doesn't work because I would take in a string, convert it into an array, reverse the array, and then convert it back to a string. So my brain just kind of went like, I don't use the reverse so much, but that would be the use case for it. But in the end, same principle holds true, is try to understand what they expect of you. So let me see here. Do we have the time? I think, I paused it. All right, we'll jump right in. I think we got enough in here that we can kind of work through the solution, right? So let's take a look at some of the solutions here. I'm just going to take a quick look at some of them. We don't have time to go through all of them, right? Pujo was the first one. Define some variable is equal to 0. Loop from 1 to 10. The number is divisible by 2. Add that number to some variable. Console log some number, right? Awesome. Ryan, variable summation. Oh, I like that. It's very technical. Variable summation. Almost sounds like a process. 4, go from I equals 0 to 10. plus 1 each loop. Check if I is even using modulus. If so, add to summation. I'm going to suggest also when you do write pseudocode that you write it so that somebody who knows Python, Ruby, Java could look at your code and understand exactly what's going on. Try to write it in really plain English. Ryan, I like kind of where you're going. You're like, I'm going to like kind of insinuate it's a for loop by putting for. If another coding language doesn't use for loops and they write it in a different way, then they're going to look at the code and be like, I don't know, what is he trying to do? I mean, I kind of understand fors. We have something similar to that. Is that what he's insinuating, right? Same thing, Jeremy, looking at yours. 4 numbers 0 through 10, modulo the numbers. If there is no remainder, then the number else. In essence, with the pseudocode, you're writing kind of code-esque, which is very specific to JavaScript. So when you pseudocode, try to stay away from specific JavaScript language code, all right? That's just pseudocoding best practices. So I just wrote a little pseudocode here, and I want to point out this. We didn't have an official lecture on pseudocode. When I teach pseudocode, I do it like this. Keywords, things that are action-based words, I uppercase to make them stand out. So here I have initialize a variable for sum, and maybe and set to 0, right? Okay. Iterate a loop starting from 0 and going to 10. Determine if the current number is even. I didn't say modulus, I just said determine, right? If it is even, increment sum by 1 and diff, right? I'm not saying that your pseudocode is bad, right? You work through it. Molly, I like how you had like steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes you might do that on an interview also and write out the actual steps. None of that is so bad. I mean, you work through the process. As long as that pseudocode would allow me, if everyone's looking at Molly's code, Jose, Flint, and Jacob would need to be able to look at Molly's code and work through their code. That's what determines good pseudocode, okay? So I'm not saying mine is better than yours. I've just been writing pseudocode. I've taught pseudocode. So I know that there is a little bit of better standard practice towards writing it, okay? And now that we have it, we could work through this together, right? We would know how to do this. So initialize a variable for sum and set it to 0. All right, so I'm going to say, hey, let sum is equal to 0, right? Easy enough. And we know we're using let because const wouldn't allow us to change it. We don't want to use vars because vars bleed out of scope. So always stick with the lets, right? Iterate a loop starting from 1 and going to 10, right? We don't really need to evaluate 0, right? So we could do for let I is equal to 1, right? You can just start at 1. While I is less than 10, right? Or is less than 11, right? If we do 11, then we should be able to hit 10, right? Because 10 will be less than 11. The minute 11 is evaluated, we won't be able to do it, right?
Or less than or equal to 10.
Yeah, or less than or equal to 10. Now, we're doing that. Now, just think, once again, the logic. Also, the time it takes to type the extra, is it easier to have it set to 11 and avoid doing the less than? I'm just saying, we could do it both ways. And there's a lot of times where I just do that because maybe that's more intuitive, right? Less than or equal to 10. I kind of know the number that I'm looking for is 10 versus the number before 10. Right? Either way would work. What's less typing, right? Less typing isn't always the answer. What's more intuitive to the person more junior than you reading it? That's what's intuitive. And then I would say I plus equals 1, right? Kind of made the indication that that's how I would write it. And then we determine if the current number is even, and that requires an if statement. So I'm just going to write the structure, right? Write the structure. Then we can fill in the blanks. So if I modulus 2 is equal to 0, or equal to 0, right? We want to use the strict operator. That's what Airbnb said. That's what we should be doing. Then we do sum is equal to sum plus equals 1, right? We could do sum plus plus, right? We could do that. Or we could do sum plus equals 1, right? Either way, make it a little bit more intuitive than the plus plus. That should work, right? That looks pretty good. And then that's it, right? And then I would kind of just console log sum, right? Hey, this is sum. I always like to leave messages too in my code, in my consoles, because after a while I have so many console logs, I don't really know what value this represents. And if I don't comment them out, I got 20 console logs. So we have 5, right? Is that going to be the case? We should have more, right? Sum plus equals 5. So I almost feel like I did something wrong. Did I do something wrong? What did you guys get?
You might have to comment out your other code at the top.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Is that?
Don't you want to be adding I instead of 1?
Well, we want to be adding, so if we need to determine, right, so ours is, right, get the numbers from 1 to 10. We could console each one separately. So here we go. I is less than 10, console log I, right? So let's, according to this, it's like, let's make sure everything is working in this instance where we would console log just I, so we know our loop working. But I think we know our loop's working, right? I don't think there's any indication that it's not working, but once again, I'm just gonna do this. Console log, this is I, right? Just wanna do that. Let's make sure. Get rid of that. And we did. We get from 1 all the way to 10, right? And we know that 5 is definitely not correct, right? I'm gonna keep going down here. I mean, obviously, they're refactoring the code a little bit, even more along the way. So what happens if you set even sum to undefined? Okay, so this looks like the code that we have, correct? I mean, I see they have even sum, I have sum. They have let I is equal to, they have start at 0 and they go to 10, right? I'm going from 1 to 10 because I want to go count numbers, right? Because that's what it said. Count numbers from 1 to 10, right? Get even numbers from 1 to 10. Then I plus equals 1. And then sum is, you're actually right. Yeah, it ran 5 times and we want I. That was my bad. I was just incrementing. So in my head, I was just saying, how many times did we find even numbers, right? That's it. I could set another thing here, like let num of even numbers, right, is equal to 0. And then I could have done, num of even numbers plus equals 1, right? I think I know why my volume goes off. I have the little touch keyboard, and I accidentally hit that touch keyboard. I don't even see it happening. It's with the new Macs. It just happened again. So I'm going to do this. Let's see what happens. The sum now is 30. Is that what everyone got? Is that the correct number? Awesome. And the sum number is 30, and I didn't console log the other one. Sum and num of even numbers, right? I'm going to get rid of this console log here because we definitely don't need this running anymore. We kind of know that it works. There we go. So we know that there are 5 counts of it, right? 5 numbers, and of those 5 numbers, they all total to be 30, okay? So my brain was in this other place. It was like, well, how many numbers are even versus summing the total numbers that were even. So that was kind of my mistake when I was reading through it, even though increment sum, and my pseudocode, I wrote my code based on my pseudocode, right? I incremented the sum by 1 because that's where my thought process was. I wasn't even thinking, right? Increment sum by the even number. I would go back and reevaluate my pseudocode. A lot of the times for yourself when you're working through other code bases, and maybe you don't know things of what they're doing, write out comments for each line of code to indicate what's happening. And then the game that you could play is at some point in time you remove all the code and now you have your pseudocode, and can you write that algorithm? Now that you have the pseudocode and the placeholders, can you actually now add to it the code needed to do the thing that it was supposed to do, right? Cool. Nobody's perfect. I think Matt mentioned it too earlier. Like, I'll make mistakes all the time. We'll pick it up, and sometimes those mistakes are kind of valuable in the learning process, and open the door to show you, another way or another implementation of this same algorithm, right? There may be instances where they want you to, how many times, or how many numbers, not the sum of the numbers. So, we good? Wasn't so hard, right? Afternoon lecture wasn't so bad. Awesome. So I'm going to do this. I think it is lab time. So I'm going to say student labs right here. Here we go. Morning lab. We're going to be doing the morning lab. So let me go here, post it. All right. There we go. There's the morning lab. I'm going to also I'm going to take a look at git status, right? I was been doing some things since the last commit. So I'm like, hey, look, this is what I got. I'm going to do git, add all those files, git commits. I'm going to say completed, conditionals, and loops, right? Git status. Looks good, right? Git a log -1 or -2 so I can see the last 2 commits, and they were mine. I can see it all. And then I can always do git push. Now, if I do git remote -v, I have 2 of them here, right? I have 2 origins and 2 upstreams. My origins are pointing to the instructor repo. My upstreams are pointing to my own repo. You have it kind of reversed. So in my instance, I would do a git push. I'm going to push it up to ours. And I could just do git push, origin, master, could do that. Or for simplicity's sake, I could just say push, and it uses origin as the default. I do that. Oh, I have to actually pull. There must be some updates. You see that message? That message states that the remote repo contains stuff that I do not have. And because it contains things that I do not have, I need to first pull those things down, resolve if there are any conflicts, and then push it up. So we want to protect that upstream from any conflicts. Conflicts should not be resolved up there. They should be resolved down here. Human logic interprets it. We evaluate it. Then we push it up. So I'm going to say git pull, and I'll pull without the J. And then there is. So it looks like, hey, there is something here, like merge branch, commit message, why the merge. So I'm just going to do this. We learned that we could do Q, $WQ, and I'm out. Now if I do a git push, I shouldn't have any problem pushing it up. And I'm pushing it to my repo, to our repo. Jerica hasn't touched the files. Matt isn't going to touch those files. This is my lecture. You shouldn't be in there. There should be no conflict. Plus, you can't really push anything anyway. Awesome. So here's a lab. I'm going to assign the lab. And in the lab, there's a lot to the lab. And the idea is, once again, we give you more than you can do within the time. And it's meant to keep pushing you forward. So don't feel like, oh, man, I didn't finish, or I was so close. It's like we intend to push you to the point where you can't. And the reason is we never want anyone bored. We don't want you sitting there not doing something and jumping on Facebook and going on LinkedIn. We don't want that. We want you to constantly be doing this. And by giving you more means you have to be doing it. So there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm not going to go through everything, but there's things towards the bottom here that you may find challenging, like writing the Fibonacci sequence or creating a checkerboard using pound signs and a bunch of console logs and like strings of text. Like, these are challenging things. Not saying do them. I'm saying they're there to challenge you. There should be like a section here that's like bonus to indicate that they are bonuses. If you can get to it, awesome. Sweet. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. So I'm going to set a timer on myself. Well, we don't need a timer. I'm going to give, I'm going to say about 40, that's going to take us about 45, 45 minutes to work on this particular lab. You need time to work on this. So it's 3:30, 4:15, we're going to come back, okay? 4:15, we will jump back online. I'll be here. You can Slack me. I might just step away and, go to the bathroom, get some water, but I'll be here. We'll come back at 4:15. That's a solid 45 minutes. Cool? Everyone good? Awesome. I think I'm going to just do this poll. How is everyone feeling going? Good. You can be honest here. So I'm just going to post this poll. So how's everyone feeling going into the lab? Good. Okay. Bit confused. Okay. I'm glad we didn't get any bit confused. That's good. It's okay if you are confused. I don't want you to feel like, man, I don't want to say a bit confused because they're going to look at me like I'm the confused, but everyone's good. Shit, I was confused half the time and when I was taking class. Now look at me now, right? Teach multiple classes. I know the material. It just took time. Sweet. Looks good. All right. You're off. 45 minutes. And then we will rejoin. I'm going to pause the recording during that time.